Hello, my friend. I'm Dr. James Miller, and before we begin, I want you to know that everything I share with you today is for educational purposes only, and it is not a substitute for the personal advice of your own physician, especially if you are managing high blood pressure, heart disease, or taking prescription medication. Please always consult your doctor before making any changes to your diet. Now, with that said, let's talk about something that might be sitting on your plate this very morning, something so ordinary, so comforting, so deeply woven into your daily routine that you would never suspect it of working quietly against your heart. If you've noticed your blood pressure creeping up lately, even though you feel like you're doing everything right, I want you to know something important right away. It's probably not just one single thing. Your doctor may already be looking at several possibilities. Things like how your kidneys are processing sodium, how your blood vessels are aging, whether there's some narrowing happening in your arteries, or even how your thyroid or your stress hormones are behaving. High blood pressure in our senior years is rarely caused by one villain alone. It's usually a slow accumulation of small daily choices, and that's actually good news, because it means small daily corrections can make a real difference too. Now here's the part that surprises so many of my patients. We spend so much energy worrying about dinner, about that occasional slice of cake, about salt at the dinner table, that we completely overlook the one meal that sets the tone for our entire cardiovascular day. Breakfast. The very meal we're told is the most important one. And here's the twist. Some of the most popular, most trusted, most classic breakfast choices for people our age may actually be quietly nudging your blood pressure upward, meal after meal, year after year, without you ever connecting the dots. I remember sitting with a patient, a lovely retired school teacher in her early 70s, who told me she simply couldn't understand why her blood pressure numbers kept climbing. She walked every morning. She had cut back on dinner salt years ago. She felt, in her words, like she was doing everything the doctor told her to do. And yet, when we sat down together and walked through a single ordinary week of her mornings, the pattern became clear. It wasn't dinner. It wasn't her walking routine, which was wonderful, by the way. It was breakfast, the one meal she had never once thought to question, because it felt so safe, so traditional, so harmless. That's the story I want you to keep in mind today, not because I want you to feel afraid, but because I want you to feel curious. Curiosity is a much more powerful motivator than fear, and it lasts longer too. So let's open this loop together and look closely at what's really happening on that plate every single morning. Let's talk anatomy for a moment, in a way that actually makes sense. Picture your blood vessels like a network of garden hoses running through your entire body. When you're young, those hoses are flexible, elastic, able to expand and contract easily as blood flows through. As we age, those hoses can stiffen, just like an old rubber hose left out in the sun too long. Cardiologists will tell you that this stiffening, combined with extra fluid volume in the bloodstream, is what really drives blood pressure higher. And what controls fluid volume more than almost anything else? Sodium. Your kidneys try to balance sodium and water like a thermostat, but when you flood the system every single morning with hidden sodium, that thermostat starts struggling to keep up. Think of your kidneys as two incredibly hardworking filtration plants, running quietly day and night, deciding moment by moment how much sodium and water to release and how much to hold on to. When sodium intake stays consistently moderate, those plants can do their job efficiently, almost effortlessly. But when sodium intake spikes early in the day, and then again at lunch, and then again at dinner, those filtration plants are essentially working overtime every single day for years. Nephrologists who study this process point out that the kidneys themselves can become less efficient with age, which means the very system designed to protect you from sodium overload may already be operating with reduced capacity, even before we add a heavy sodium breakfast into the mix. There's also a hormonal piece to this puzzle that I think deserves your attention. When your body senses excess sodium, it activates a chain of hormonal signals, sometimes referred to as the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, which sounds complicated, but think of it simply as your body's internal alarm system for fluid balance. When that alarm gets triggered repeatedly, morning after morning, it can contribute to blood vessels narrowing slightly and your heart working a little harder to push blood through that narrowed space. Over months and years, this repeated activation is one of the mechanisms cardiologists believe may be associated with the kind of slow, creeping blood pressure increase so many of my patients describe to me. I want to pause here and remind you gently that this is not the only mechanism at play, and it's not happening in isolation. Peripheral artery disease, diabetes-related nerve and vessel changes, low vitamin B12 levels affecting nerve and vascular health, and underlying heart conditions can all contribute to symptoms that overlap with what we're discussing today. That's precisely why this conversation is meant to complement your doctor's evaluation, not replace it. So now let's talk about what's actually happening on your breakfast table. The first food I want to gently bring to your attention is processed breakfast meat. I'm talking about your bacon, your breakfast sausage, your ham slices. Now, I'm not here to demonize bacon, because I know how many of you grew up with it, how it smells like Sunday mornings and family and comfort. But here's the truth your cardiologist wants you to understand. Processed meats are cured and preserved using sodium-based compounds, and that sodium load can be surprisingly high for just a couple of strips. When that sodium hits your bloodstream first thing in the morning, your blood vessels may respond by holding onto more fluid, which can place additional pressure against your vessel walls. This doesn't mean one bacon breakfast will harm you. It means a daily pattern, repeated for years, can quietly contribute to the kind of sustained pressure increase that shows up on your readings at the doctor's office. What makes processed breakfast meat particularly tricky is that the saltiness often gets masked by smoke flavoring, sugar curing, or pairing it with something sweet like maple syrup or pancakes. Your taste buds register sweetness and smokiness far more than they register the sodium hiding underneath, which means you can consume a meaningfully salty food without your palate ever raising a warning flag. Cardiologists sometimes refer to this as the masked sodium effect, where flavor profiles essentially disguise how much salt you're truly consuming. This is one possible factor among many, but it's a pattern worth recognizing in your own daily habits. The second food might surprise you even more, because it doesn't taste salty at all. I'm talking about refined, sugary breakfast items, things like sweetened cereals, flavored instant oatmeal packets, white toast with jam, or pastries. Here's what many people don't realize. Blood pressure isn't only about sodium. It's also deeply connected to how your body manages blood sugar and insulin. When you eat a breakfast that is mostly refined carbohydrates and added sugar, your blood sugar can spike quickly, and your body releases insulin to manage that spike. Over years, repeated insulin surges first thing every morning may be associated with changes in how your blood vessels function, including how well they relax and expand. Endocrinologists and cardiologists who study this connection point out that insulin resistance and hypertension often travel together, like two old friends who show up at the same party. This is one possible factor among several, not a guaranteed cause, but it's one worth paying attention to. There's another layer to this that I find fascinating, and I think you will too. When blood sugar rises and falls sharply, rather than rising and falling gently, it can also affect your energy and your mood throughout the morning, which in turn can affect how active you are for the rest of the day. Less morning movement, more mid-morning fatigue, and a tendency to reach for another quick carbohydrate snack around 11 o'clock can all become part of a daily rhythm that, over time, makes healthy blood pressure habits harder to sustain. It's not just about the direct biological effect of sugar on your vessels. It's about the entire cascade of choices that a sugar-heavy breakfast can set into motion for the rest of your day. And the third food is perhaps the sneakiest of them all, because it often gets marketed as healthy. I'm talking about convenience breakfast items like canned breakfast soups, certain frozen breakfast sandwiches, and instant flavored oatmeal cups. These products are engineered for shelf life and flavor, and that often means manufacturers add significant sodium, sometimes hidden under names like sodium bicarbonate, monosodium glutamate, or simply natural flavoring. A product can look perfectly innocent on the front of the package while carrying a sodium load that rivals a fast food meal. Many of my patients are stunned when we sit down together and actually read the nutrition label on their go-to breakfast item. This category deserves special attention for those of us in our senior years specifically, because convenience foods become more appealing as cooking from scratch every morning feels like more effort than it used to. I understand that completely, and I would never ask you to spend an hour in the kitchen every single morning. But there's an important distinction between convenience and hidden harm. A food can be quick and simple without being loaded with sodium, and part of what we're doing together today is learning to tell the difference. Front-of-package marketing words like heart-healthy, whole grain, or low-fat do not automatically mean low sodium. In fact, sometimes the opposite is true, because manufacturers compensate for reduced fat or sugar by adding more salt to preserve flavor. This is exactly why reading the actual nutrition panel, rather than trusting the marketing language on the front, becomes such an important habit. Now, before you panic and clear out your pantry, I want to bring you back to something grounding. Urologists who study fluid balance and nephrologists who study kidney function remind us that the body is remarkably adaptive. It's not about achieving perfection, it's about awareness and about gentle, sustainable shifts that you can actually maintain for the rest of your life. So let's talk about what you can do, starting tomorrow morning, with very little effort and very little cost. The first step is simple substitution, rather than elimination. Instead of 2 strips of processed bacon, consider a couple of eggs prepared simply, perhaps with a small amount of olive oil. Eggs, contrary to old, outdated fears, are now understood by most nutrition researchers to be a reasonable source of protein for most people, and they don't carry the same sodium load as cured meats. If you truly love that smoky, savory breakfast flavor, try sautéing some mushrooms or tomatoes with a touch of black pepper and garlic. You'll be amazed how satisfying that can be. If eggs aren't your preference, or your doctor has advised you to watch your cholesterol intake closely, plain Greek yogurt with a handful of walnuts and a few slices of fresh fruit can offer a similarly satisfying, protein-rich start without the sodium burden of cured meats. The goal here isn't to find one single, correct breakfast. It's to find a small handful of options you genuinely enjoy, so that the healthier choice becomes the easy choice, the default choice, rather than something that feels like a sacrifice every single morning. The second step involves becoming a label detective for just 1 week. Pick up whatever cereal, oatmeal packet, or breakfast bread you currently use and simply look at the sodium and added sugar lines. You don't need to memorize numbers or set rigid limits today. Just notice. Awareness is often the first real step toward change. If you find a product surprisingly high in either category, consider switching to plain rolled oats that you flavor yourself with cinnamon, a few berries, or a small drizzle of honey. This single switch alone removes both the hidden sodium and the refined sugar spike in one move. I encourage you to keep a small notebook or even just a notepad on your kitchen counter, where you jot down the sodium content of 2 or 3 breakfast items you eat most often. Many of my patients find this exercise genuinely eye-opening, not because they were doing anything wrong on purpose, but because the food industry has made it remarkably easy to consume more sodium than we realize without ever tasting an overtly salty flavor. Knowledge in this case truly is a form of power, and it costs you nothing but a few minutes of attention. The third step is what I like to call the potassium balance ritual, and it costs you almost nothing. Potassium works like a counterbalance to sodium in your body, helping your kidneys release excess sodium more efficiently. Foods like bananas, cooked spinach, sweet potatoes, and plain yogurt are wonderfully accessible sources. Adding even one potassium-rich food to your breakfast, like half a banana sliced over your oatmeal, can be a small, realistic, evidence-informed habit that supports your body's natural sodium-potassium balance. This isn't a miracle cure, and no responsible doctor would tell you otherwise, but it is a reasonable, low-cost addition that fits naturally into almost any morning routine. I do want to mention something important here because I care about your safety more than I care about giving you a tidy list of tips. If you are living with kidney disease, or you take certain medications such as ACE inhibitors, ARBs, or potassium-sparing diuretics, your potassium levels need to be monitored carefully, and adding potassium-rich foods without your doctor's awareness could potentially cause problems rather than solve them. This is precisely the kind of detail that makes a personal conversation with your physician so essential before adjusting your diet. The fourth step is about timing and hydration. Many seniors unintentionally start their day mildly dehydrated, especially if they take diuretic medications. A glass of water before your morning coffee or tea can support healthy blood volume regulation and may help your kidneys manage sodium more effectively throughout the day. It's such a small ritual, but cardiologists often emphasize that hydration status plays a meaningful supporting role in how your blood pressure behaves throughout the morning hours. The fifth and final step in our roadmap today is about pacing rather than ingredients. Eating breakfast slowly, sitting down rather than rushing, and giving your body time to register fullness can reduce the tendency to reach for a second helping of something salty or sweet simply out of habit. This may sound like a small, almost unimportant detail, but many physicians who study eating behavior in older adults note that rushed eating is associated with less mindful food choices overall. Something as simple as sitting at the table for 15 calm minutes, rather than eating standing up at the counter, can shift your entire relationship with that first meal of the day. I want you to imagine, just for a moment, what your mornings could feel like a few months from now. Instead of starting your day with a hidden sodium and sugar bomb that quietly stresses your cardiovascular system, you start with eggs and sautéed vegetables, or warm oats with banana and cinnamon, a glass of water, and a sense of calm control over your own health. This isn't about restriction or fear. It's about reclaiming your mornings as a foundation of strength rather than a hidden source of strain. Of course, I want to be completely honest with you, because that's the kind of doctor I strive to be. Changing your breakfast alone will not single-handedly cure high blood pressure, and no responsible physician would ever claim that. Hypertension is influenced by genetics, activity levels, stress, sleep quality, existing health conditions, and the medications you may already be taking. What we're talking about today is one meaningful piece of a much larger puzzle, a piece that happens to be entirely within your control, inexpensive to change, and surprisingly powerful when sustained over time. Before you make any significant changes to your diet, especially if you are living with diabetes, kidney disease, heart failure, or you're on blood pressure medication, please have a conversation with your doctor first. Some medications interact with potassium intake in ways that require careful monitoring, and your physician knows your complete medical history far better than any video ever could. Use what you've learned today as a starting point for that conversation, not as a replacement for it. You've taken a wonderful step today simply by seeking to understand your own body a little better. That curiosity, that willingness to learn rather than ignore, is exactly the mindset that leads to a longer, stronger, more vibrant life in these later years. But our journey through the hidden world of senior health isn't finished yet. Because while we've been focused on your blood pressure this morning, there's another symptom that quietly affects millions of people over 65, something many of you have felt in your legs by the end of the day, a heaviness, a swelling, a dull ache that you've simply learned to live with. And in our next conversation together, I want to walk you through exactly what your circulatory system might be trying to tell you, and what simple, evidence-informed rituals might help bring you real relief. Until then, take care of that heart of yours. It's worked hard for you for a very long time, and it deserves your attention now more than ever.